Welcome back, everyone, and if you're new to the channel, welcome. In this video, I'm going to be discussing some habits that I used to become a better programmer and some of the advice that I might give and some of the common advice that I was given when I was learning to code. Now, caveat off the start, it's not like I have a decade of experience. I have about 3 years of programming experience, and I do work at a programming-related job. So I've gone through the process, and I'm still in the early learning curve, but I really don't think that programming ever ends as far as the learning curve goes. It's from what I've heard, there's always that sense that you need to learn a lot more. So let's start with some common advice, and then we'll move on to my own advice and then some habits. So some common advice that I hear is code every day, build something, it doesn't matter what, contribute to open source, don't try to learn everything at once, and of course, become a 10x programmer in 10 days with my new online course available at, and I'll let you fill in the blank on that one. And so there's some good and there's some bad here with the common advice. And I shouldn't even say bad, but I'd say stuff that didn't really work for me. So my advice is learn something every day, code with no expectations and goals, just play, do what you love, don't bother with anything you hate, try to learn anything but focus on language, not tools, and there is no spoon. So let's start with the first one. Learn something every day. This is, of course, to parallel the common advice of code every day. I think that coding every day is a great idea in premise. It was definitely easier for me to do my own coding every day before getting a job that focused on programming. But if I include my current coding job, I'm technically doing way more coding than I was before. But what I've never stopped doing is learning something every day. And so what that might mean is picking a particular JavaScript method or a particular tool. Like right now I'm working a lot through Node.js and trying to become a lot more skilled at understanding what it can do in the server-side JavaScript world. So I just pick something and I try to learn every day. And one of the habits that I use to do that is this idea of playing, which is advice number 2. And this is in opposition to build something. It doesn't matter what. So I'll show you one of my playing sandbox folders from the other day. This one is from April 28th. And you'll see it in the path, it's just, at my root folder, I just have code, a folder simply called playing. And then every day that I have some spare time, I just make a folder based on that date. And then I just start coding. And so in this particular day, I was following a Ramda video, this guy here, and I chose to just learn a bit more about functional programming, and so I decided to just pick Ramda. And the benefit of doing something like this, as opposed to trying to build something, is that I come in with no expectations. I just go, today we're going to start coding something. And I open up my text editor, and I just start coding. And in this case, it was Ramda, with no expectations that I would be a Ramda expert, that I would build an app in Ramda. It just helps me expand my horizons a bit. And I've opened another one over here. Well, actually, this is just my list of all my folders. So in February, I was relocating, so there's not a ton from February and March. But you can see I've really picked it up in April. And each day that I have a bit of spare time, just pop open a folder, start coding, and then I move on the next day, which means that I don't have any expectations that it needs to be the greatest, most scalable thing ever. And if it breaks after because I've been playing around, then it breaks, and that's fine. And so some days I might just decide that I want to do everything I possibly can with mutual recursion. Or the other day I popped open events on Node and just went, all right, what weird thing could I come up with for events? And it always starts exactly the same. I just follow along with their explanation of the basics. And then I say, okay, that's cool. Now what if I tried to add 3 event listeners to the same event emitter? What could I do with that? What if I had an event listener, that then calls another function that then writes to a fault file and then reads it, and then that emits an event. It really doesn't matter what you try to do. It's really just playing around and seeing what you can do. And for me, this has been a way better way of having a lot of fun with my programming while also not giving myself too much pressure, because I know I can always ditch it the next day. And this is really how I got into doing a lot of the functional programming methods that I use, the filter, map, reduce, those different methods that are available in JavaScript, is I would just pop it open one day and just start coding and see how much I could do with map. What could I do if I chained 4 maps together, and just see what the results were. And it really gave me an opportunity to learn these things inside and out. And what I'm trying to explain here is that it's a focus on language, which is another one of my suggestions down here. You can learn anything you want, just focus on language. And so what that means is there was definitely a time where I was getting a bit too focused on learning, for example, the ins and outs of React, when I had no business learning the ins and outs of React, because I still had not learned much about the ins and outs of JavaScript, and my job did not require me to know much about React. I had no plans to build anything in React. I just felt like I needed to know it. And I think I'm way better off spending time learning about the power of a language or learning a new language and making my brain think in different ways and trying to solve problems in unique ways with whatever language I choose. And that's what I'm getting at here with There Is No Spoon. When I first started trying to solve a lot of problems, I had this idea that there was a one right answer and one right way to do everything. And the cool thing about programming is once you really start doing it, you realize that, well, there's always going to be better ways or more optimal ways as far as speed goes. Especially when you're just starting out and you go in with these things, with these playing experiments of no expectations, you can really just say, I want to solve this problem. I want to get this problem working, and it doesn't matter how I do it. So if you are deciding to use file system.writeFile to write to a file just so you can use it as a temporary state machine, that may not make any sense at all to someone who knows a better way. But if that's what works for you, that's what matters, because right now, when you're learning, it's about solving problems and trying to figure out different ways of thinking. And so one of the things I've done up here is collecting a few different places that I've gone in the past to expand my knowledge and understanding of programming. And so object.assign, this came up recently. I was doing a video on map, and I had an issue where I was actually having a side effect on the object that I was trying to create a new version of. And so I ended up having to resort back to looking up object.assign just to see how it worked. And it's very simple. I just couldn't remember exactly the syntax and what to expect from it. And so this is one of the places I always go, is to the MDN, and just look at the way that they explain things. They tend to provide good examples. And so this is a great place, again, if you're looking for something to learn, just pop on to MDN. Maybe you're not familiar with object.defineProperties. So let's say it's Saturday, April 29th, and you need to think of something that you want to learn. Don't try to build something if you don't have any ideas on what to build. Just pop open MDN, look down at all the different methods and say, define properties. Okay, I don't know how to use that. Click on it, read it, come up with some examples, start following their examples, make sure you understand it. And once you understand it, you'll probably start thinking of new ways you could use it. And then maybe you build a little mini program around it. And so it's all about having fun and exploring and expanding your knowledge in very unique little areas, because these tools will come to mind later when you need to figure out a way to solve something. Next up is Code Wars. This works really well for me if I'm trying to get a grasp on a new language. So, for example, I found that setting up Haskell on my own system, it got very confusing because I wasn't able to set myself up good error messages. Whereas if I pop into Code Wars and start running through their different Haskell challenges. Code Wars, if you're not familiar, by the way, provides you with algorithms and problems to solve, and then you have to write it in whatever language you choose. So primarily I do this in JavaScript, but when I was trying to learn a bit about SQL, I came in here. Haskell, the same. Go, I haven't really done any of, but hey, it's selected. And so this is a good way for me to start thinking about the basics of a new language. It also gives you a bit more structure, and if you like the reward of coming up with a problem that someone else presented, this is a great place to go. Next up, if you're more interested in front-end stuff, this has pretty much nothing to do with back-end, hence the name. Frontend Masters is a great place to learn things, particularly if you're starting out. I would recommend staying, as you might expect, away from frameworks. Brian Holt does an amazing job, no offense to Brian, but I would probably say stay away from the React and Angular type videos as long as you're learning the language, and staying with a lot more of, for example, Kyle Simpson's stuff. Doug Crawford has a video on here that'll introduce you to JavaScript. And these are really good ways to get the fundamentals of the language down. Scott Moss, his video is also really good. They're a good way to get the fundamentals of the language down so that once you're ready, then you'll have a really good understanding of what the heck's going on in, for example, I don't know, Firebase plus React. If you're struggling with the code they're writing and you're not just learning the framework, you're going to have a rough time. So I'd recommend coming to Frontend Masters for something like that. And if you're not interested in paying the $50 or whatever it is a month for Frontend Masters, there's always Will Stern at learncode.academy. This guy is fantastic for free content. His stuff was what I spent the better part of 2016 watching. A lot of his stuff that I watched was from React. I think he even had these videos out maybe earlier than that, like the early JavaScript videos in 2015 and earlier. It's a great place to start. He's super enthusiastic, very charismatic, and I really like the way he explains stuff. So definitely shout out to Will Stern. He's been a huge help to me. Now, when we're looking at moving forward in what you want to learn, my suggestion is do what you love and don't bother with anything that you hate. And the common advice that I hear that opposes that is don't try to learn everything all at once. And now, while that's true, it always frustrated me when I would see let's say a program set up where you had to decide between learning JavaScript or learning Python. And they don't give you any example code or anything. You're just expected to somehow know which one you prefer. And you have no idea, because why would you know? So I would say that it's important to actually dip your toe into different things so that you understand how everything fits together and understand maybe what you like and what you don't like. Because coding is such a huge ocean of different options and opportunities that if you don't like something, for example, PHP, I have no interest in doing WordPress and PHP stuff. So I don't do anything with WordPress or PHP, because why would I ever need to? There's plenty of other things I could spend my time doing, and I really like JavaScript and having a great time starting to learn the more functional programming concepts and introducing myself into more functional languages. And I really just have no interest in doing the other things. So for right now, I could spend my entire life trying to learn functional programming and I won't master it. So there's no point in spending your time on things you don't like. That's basically what I'm trying to say. So my suggestion is, I was actually going to show you guys a couple examples of stuff that I've done recently. So this was, again, my Ramda. Let's just exit out of this. And we'll go clear that. Oh, and so Vim, for example, I just started that on Monday. Monday morning, I just thought, what should I learn about today? And I'd been hearing a lot about Vim at my workplace, and I thought, Vim sounds fun. Let's try to learn that. So that's what I started doing. I think April 26th, 27th is what I'm looking for. Yeah, so in this one, what I tried to do was, it started with just trying to do everything with functions. And then it became, let's build a janky knockoff of JSX, just because that seemed like a fun idea, which is why it spanned 2 days. So let's go open index.html. And so this is what I made with my JSX and template strings. Obviously, it's not very pretty, but it was basically just because I wanted to play around and see if I could integrate JSX and CSS. So let's pop that open. I think it's run.js. Oh, I must already have it open somewhere. No, apparently not. For some reason, it just has multiple versions of it here. So let's just go vim run.js. And so what I made in this file is just an index function that calls that is the return value of an HTML function, which accepts a variable called new block. And this is where I stored my CSS, because that's imported from a CSS class function that creates a CSS class called new block, and then calls a style function that takes in background color and red to create the red background color. And then I just reg it to an index file. So if I hop over to, let's say, css.js, then all I've done is create a little template string that is a CSS class that takes in a name and styles. The content gets all reduced together, so I can pass in as many things as I want, and it'll reduce it all into content while keeping the name separate. So you pass in the name and then as many styles as you want, and those will all be formatted just like CSS. And then styles you can call by passing in whatever the property and whatever the value is. And I've got a lot more of the same in the HTML.js. And so once again, just things that get reduced down, put it in between the, into the div element, and you add the class that you passed in. And so there's no purpose to this at all. I could just download JSX as a module, and it's going to work a whole lot better, handle a lot more edge cases. But this isn't production code. This is just something I decided to do for fun, and it got me thinking in interesting ways. And I think that doing little projects like this have contributed a lot to how rapidly I feel like I've improved as a developer over the past, I'll say, 3 months for sure, that I've been doing this exact structure, but just little projects like this that I ended up removing that I've been doing for probably the last 8 months. So take it with a grain of salt. I think this is a good practice, and if you agree, I'd say give it a shot. If you're skeptical, you can always resort back to some of the other suggestions that other people have given. Obviously, they're not bad advice. They're just some advice that I might amend. So thanks for watching the video if you make it this far. If you did, give it a thumbs up, and I'd love to hear a comment on maybe what you'd like to see next time. Thanks, guys. Have a good one. Of course, now I can't find. There we go. Bye, guys.